This is our time to make a difference. Do you understand? Jaeger pilots, do you understand?
One way to find out.
Pacific Rim Uprising needs to be massively awesome to escape the giant shadow cast by the original. I will let you know how close it gets, but first, please subscribe to Universe for more stuff on the stuff that you love, like Avengers Infinity War, Tomb Raider, and a whole lot more. Pacific Rim is set in this world where giant monsters called Kaiju started coming through breaches from another dimension and attacking like coastal cities all over the world. In response, humanity started building these giant mech suits called Jaegers that could fight them. The original Pacific Rim was directed by Guillermo del Toro, who we all know is a fucking genius, and it was just kind of magical. There was just something about it. Unfortunately, del Toro was busy with a little movie called The Shape of Water. We all know how that turned out. And so he did not return for Pacific Rim Uprising. Instead, this movie is directed by Stephen DeKnight, who has a pretty good track record working on shows like Netflix's Daredevil, which we also love. So this could have turned out really good. Unfortunately, Pacific Rim Uprising just isn't as good as the original. The first Pacific Rim was like so good. It was so good at world building and like establishing all these side characters and the mythology of the whole kaiju invasion, everything that had happened up until then, the way Jaeger pilots were like rock stars. And Uprising just doesn't really know what to do with this world that the original established. There's a lot of stuff that it kind of tries to catch you up on, like what drift is, but it just doesn't do a good job explaining stuff. If you haven't seen the original or you haven't watched it recently, you're just gonna be confused for a lot of this movie. Uprising also retcons the original in a lot of ways that don't necessarily make sense. One good example is John Boyega's character, Jake Pentecost. He's supposed to be the son of Idris Elba's character from the original, Stacker Pentecost. There's a way, I think, to do that that makes sense. Like they could have pulled a Creed, where he doesn't know his dad, right? But instead they wedge in this whole backstory for Jake where he was in the Jaeger program at the same time that his dad was still alive. And if you look at like the relationship between Stacker and Mako in the first movie, the father-daughter thing, it's super important to the character. If he had a son the whole time who was like, used to be in the program, who he doesn't even talk to anymore, it kind of makes him seem like a huge asshole. And I don't think it's like the right way to shoehorn in a new character into the existing story. Some characters from the original return, which is really fun, but the movie doesn't really know what to do with them a lot of the time. Like Charlie Day's character, Newt, and Vern Gorman's character, Dr. Gottlieb, were kind of like this odd couple in the original. Their dynamic was one of the most fun things about the movie, and now they don't even work together anymore. They're barely in scenes together, and it's just not as fun. There's a huge cast of new characters as well, and the best one is definitely Kaylee Spaney's character, Namara. She's like this 15-year-old whiz kid who like is super scrappy, and she scavenges for parts, and she built her own working Jaeger, which is awesome.
You give up way too easy.
That's what they think.
John Boyega's character, Jake Pentecost. Listen, I love John Boyega. He's kind of doing the same character here that he did in Attack the Block, where he's like, you know, this kind of gruff, like sarcastic dude who's like always ready with a joke. It kind of works, but like way too many of his scenes end with him making the exact same joke, where like it feels like they didn't really know how to end a conversation, so they just have him go, this face, how about this face though, huh? Like seriously, multiple of his scenes just end with him kind of going, yeah, but wait until the kaiju get a load of this face, eh? Eh? One thing that's kind of just unclear in this movie, and it's probably my biggest complaint, is whether humanity has like prepared for you know, the eventuality of the kaiju returning. Remember, it's been 10 years, but most of the movie takes place on this one Jaeger base in China, and it's not really clear from the movie whether there are other bases around the world. I think there are supposed to be, but we only ever get to know this one group of characters. So when the kaiju comes back, everything kind of just falls on this small group of characters, as if every other Jaeger pilot has like been killed off screen, and it just doesn't really work, and it kind of betrays the world building that the original put so much work into. So by the end, it's just Jake, it is Scott Eastwood's character, Nate, and it is Namara, Kaylee Spaney's character, and her fellow teenage cadets who are like half trained, and it just becomes like this thing about like the kids have to like step up and save the world and everything depends on them, and it's like a great message. I think kids are gonna like it a lot, but the original had like this darker tone, and this kind of feels too much like Spy Kids. I hate saying it, but it does. Lastly, there's some plot stuff that I won't really get into because it's kind of spoiler territory, but suffice to say, some shit goes down, and it's not really set up well, it's not really explained very well, and afterward you're kind of just like, what? How did we get here? One of the actors winds up kind of playing against type a little bit, and it just doesn't really work in my opinion. So here's what's good. Pacific Rim Uprising definitely has at least one thing going for it: the Jaegers and the Kaiju, because they look awesome. If you don't give a shit about any of this and you just want to see giant monsters fighting giant robots, you're gonna be pretty satisfied. Also, Kaylee Spaney is great, John Boyega is great, even though his character doesn't make a lot of sense within this world. And overall, honestly, it's just really fun to return to the world of Pacific Rim, even though the movie isn't perfect. There's plenty of bad as well, though. It kind of feels like Uprising doesn't know what to do with the world and the characters that the original established. The plot is kind of vague, and there's some stuff going on off-screen or behind the scenes that's not really clear. Some of the new characters don't make as much sense. You don't really come out loving them like you love the original cast. There's a lot of janky retconning that I kind of hated. And lastly, like I said earlier, it kind of just gets this Spy Kids vibe because of the focus on like the younger generation of pilots. Kids are gonna like it, I did not. If the original Pacific Rim hadn't been so great, then Uprising might have been like a pretty good giant monster movie, but unfortunately the sequel can't escape the original's massive kaiju-sized shadow. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to GameSpot Universe for more on the stuff that you love. Leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think of Pacific Rim Uprising or of the original. Hit me up on Twitter at RogueCheddar if you want to yell at me. Maybe there's a lot of stuff in this movie that I missed. Maybe the plot actually makes perfect sense and I'm just dumb. Maybe it actually makes perfect sense and I fell asleep halfway through. Who knows? No, I'm not going to say that because then people will accuse me of doing that.